Welcome to the Half Empty, Half Full Consumer Advocacy Radio Show. Listen in nationwide on the Tan Talk and Starcom radio networks with your host, Lori Zook, the consumer champion. Each week, we'll be discussing problems and solutions, changing negatives to positives, and helping you, the consumer, to learn something new. Get smarter faster and avoid scams and fraud. All opinions are that of the host and guests, and all shows are for educational purposes only and not to be construed as legal advice. Here's your host, Lori Zook.
Welcome to the show. My guests today are Albert Verile and Kirby Lavallee. They're from Sharpline Investigations. Today we're going to be talking about private investigations and fraud. I want to welcome you gentlemen to the show, and if you'll share with our listeners a bit about yourself and your background.
Well, my name is Albert Verile, as mentioned. I attended St. Louis University, where I received my bachelor's in criminal justice and specialization in homeland security. I applied to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office and became a deputy. And my last assignment there was a street crimes unit.
Okay, very good. And Kirby?
I went to the University of Central Florida where I got my bachelor's in criminal justice and public administration. I also went to the University of South Florida where I graduated with a master's in criminal justice administration. I also worked at the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office for 5 years as a deputy, and my last assignment was a DUI investigator.
Okay. Well, this is going to be a very interesting show, and I want to kind of jump in here right into private investigators. Are they licensed by the state, and what is required for licensing?
The answer to that is yes. You do have to be licensed by the state of Florida, and the requirements for that are found on their website, the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. There's different things that are required to become an agency for strictly private investigations. And then on top of that, some agencies take it a step further if they're going to be doing security, which would be a different license for that as well.
Okay, now we're in the state of Florida, so the rules could be different in different states, correct?
Yeah, correct. There could be different regulations and requirements to get that license depending on where you're located.
Okay. What about all the investigators that I see advertising on Craigslist? Craigslist scares me. I mean, are those investigators licensed?
Yeah, you may have some investigators on there that are licensed. However, you always want to check before you hire a private investigator. And as mentioned previously, the best way to do so is through the Department of Agriculture. You can go on their website, or you can even call them and verify the agency's license number.
All right. Now, what happens if you find out that an investigator is not licensed? Because, you know, this is Florida. I'm sure it happens in every state. What do you do if you find out they're not licensed, especially after you've hired them?
Yeah, that's something that's good to ask, because any advertisement that an investigations company does, they have to have their A license number attached to that advertisement. So that way the public knows this person is licensed and what their license number is. And if they don't advertise with that, chances are they're probably not licensed in the state of Florida. And that's very easily to check, because all you have to do is call the Department of Agriculture, go on their website, type in the company's name or their A license number, and that can be verified at that time. And if you find that they're not licensed, at that time the Department of Agriculture would take that step to go out and investigate them.
Okay. Now, insurance, do they need to be insured in this state?
For private investigation agencies, no, they do not have to be. The only requirement that the state of Florida has at this time is that a security agency has to have a minimum insurance policy. But where we take that a step further is to have that insurance. Keeps our clients protected, keeps our investigators and our company protected as well.
Okay, so while the state doesn't require it, individually a company can say, hey, we're going to have insurance to be covered.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Tell me a bit about the type of training that you undergo to become a private investigator. I know you guys were formerly, with the police department. Is that qualification right there, or can somebody take a course? What do you have to do?
Yeah, there's two different ways. You either have previous investigative experience, or you can take a 40-hour course. If you don't have any previous law enforcement, or not law enforcement rather, but investigative experience, you can take that 40-hour course, and upon completing that, you find an agency, a private investigation agency that's going to sponsor you, and you'd be considered a CC. You'll be sponsored for a 2-year time frame, and
Okay.
after that 2 years, you'll become a C licensed investigator.
All right. Tell me a bit about the types of cases that your firm handles, and you're welcome to give examples, but of course don't give any names.
Yeah, our firm handles anything from cheating spouses and serving domestic cases, protection details, looking after their kids as they go on vacations or family members. We do work for attorneys' offices, personal injury cases, reinvestigating cases that the police already investigated and looking further into those, as well as business fraud investigations where we would actually go sometimes undercover into businesses, look through their files, their record keeping, see exactly how their business operates. So we can really kind of cater our investigations, from individuals to attorneys' offices, insurance companies, workman's comp fraud. So really, it's specific to the individual requests that we would receive.
Okay, give me some examples of some cases.
An example of, for instance, the most common thing I think that we get is the cheating spouse and cheaters and stuff like that. And, yeah, those cases there are, sometimes it's people that are just, have a suspicion that they want clarity on. And those cases can be anywhere from just going out and verifying that somebody showed up to an activity that they said they were going to. But in most cases, it's, developing a strategic plan to go out and say, hey, you have this suspicion. Let's look into it some more. And most of the time we do that over like a 3-day span. So we would, go out there and physically verify with physical surveillance what that person does and document their daily day-to-day activity and their daily moves.
Okay. Anything to add to that?
No.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, what made each of you want to become a private investigator?
Well, we always wanted to be entrepreneurs, and we actually met in the sheriff's office. We worked together very closely. We were zone partners, so we've pretty much been through a lot together, especially being in law enforcement. So that's always been a dream of ours to be entrepreneurs, and we do investigations in the public sector. Why not do them in the private sector now, and make our dream a reality?
All right. Should a good private investigator have experience in things like interviewing techniques or serving as an expert witness? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. You should always check qualifications for the investigators you're going to hire. For example, for our firm, we actually put our qualifications for our investigators on our website. We list what classes we've been to, what trainings we've been to, our experiences. So it's always good to check and verify to make sure that the individual you're hiring is going to be qualified for the job.
All right. Now, how do you go about finding a reputable private investigation firm?
And Laura, I'm glad you asked that because most of the time, people, when they're looking for investigations firms, the first place they go is on Google or Yahoo or one of the search engines. And that's good, but you must look a little bit further than that. And I think it goes down to actually looking about what is that company doing in the community? Who are they members of any professional organizations? And there are several professional organizations all around the nation and around the state. Our firm in particular, we've joined local organizations such as the Wesley Chapel Chamber of Commerce, the Carrollwood Area Business Association. So we're focused on the local community and being involved here with other businesses. But in addition to those, there are professional organizations that private investigations companies strictly can be a member of, and that can all be found online as well.
Now, can private investigation firms, are they rated? For example, if you're looking up lawyers, they can go to a website called avo.com and see the rankings. Do they do the same thing for private investigation firms or not?
They do, but it would be strictly on, like, for instance, Google reviews or Yelp, Angie's List, specific servers or search engines like that would have those reviews housed there. But there's not, one specifically like the one you mentioned for lawyers at this time. I think it would be good though.
Right. Then you'd be able to check on, right. Now, how do you check out a private investigation firm to see if they've had disciplinary actions? For example, I know, again, I'll go back to attorneys. Yep. If they've been disciplined, you can go online and usually find out that information. You might not know what they were disciplined for, but you can tell they were. So how does that work for a private investigation firm?
Yeah, it's similar in that regards. And you can actually go to, like we mentioned earlier, the Department of Agriculture, go to their website, and you can verify to see if that particular firm has had any kind of disciplinary actions in the past.
Okay. Typically, how do private investigation firms charge? Do they charge by the hour or the job? And I'm going to assume that it would be based upon the skill level, I would think, of that investigation firm.
Yeah, it is. it's either by the hour or by the job, and it depends. Something that we do a little bit different than just by the hours, we've created all-inclusive packaging. So with that, the hourly rate is reduced. There's no mileage charges, no tolls, no hidden fees, for that matter, in the actual price. But when it comes down to the actual hourly rate, you're going to find ranges anywhere from $50 upwards of $100, and sometimes more, depending on, obviously, qualifications, insurance, if that firm is actually even licensed. Because a lot of times you'll find that guys are doing investigations for $50 an hour, but they have no qualifications or licensing to back up, charging more. So you're going to get exactly what you're paying for, essentially, as a non-licensed, non-insured guy most of the time.
Right, and the first thing that makes me think about is Craigslist, because that's where a lot of people go to look for different services. But if they go to Craigslist, that they might be hiring someone that is, isn't qualified, so to speak, correct?
Mm-hmm. They could be, and that goes back to having that agency license number posted. We have posts on Craigslist, as with a lot of other companies, and it's just another form of getting the name out there, getting that advertisement, because a lot of people have gone to Craigslist just kind of as like a hub, like an online marketplace, for instance, where they can get that information. And as long as that agency license number is on there, verify it with the state. Is this company licensed, insured? Are they legitimate? And I think that goes along with anything that you do business with, just verifying, doing your due diligence, and getting that information and checking to make sure that it is legit.
Great. I think that's great advice. Well, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Our highly competitive and hectic world is fraught with dishonesty and challenges. Critical decisions must be made on a daily basis with accuracy when substantial assets are at risk. When you are confronted with a decision point involving opportunity and risk, consult with Sharpline Investigations, statewide experts in due diligence, investigations, and litigation support. Sharpline's professionals work with clients to conduct interviews, deep background investigations, and develop facts and intelligence related to the litigation. When circumstances require confidential and expert fact-finding, turn to Sharpline Investigations, the statewide leaders in investigations and risk mitigation. Visit sharplineinvestigations.com or call 855-394-0042.
Are your credit reports a mess? Are debt collectors hounding you? Maybe you're in foreclosure or headed towards foreclosure and don't know where to turn. It's time to stop panicking. Take back control of your life. Make the first step by calling Credit Education Consultants today at 813-500-6064. That's 813-500-6064. Mention the word radio for a free 15-minute consultation. Don't delay. Call today.
Welcome back to the Half Empty, Half Full Talk Radio Show. We are going to talk in this segment about cheating spouses and significant others that cheat, because I know that that's something that you guys probably get hired to investigate a lot. So if somebody suspects that their other half is cheating on them, and they probably have a gut feeling, talk to me a little bit about what the signs of cheaters are.
Yeah, Lori, like you mentioned, a gut feeling is pretty telling in and of itself. But there are some signs, and I'll go over a few of them that you can look out for. There's such things as staying late at work. Somebody who's repeatedly staying late at work, and granted they could be busy at work, but if it's a continual, ongoing thing, there's a reason why they're staying late at work. Somebody that's not necessarily ever gone to the gym before, starting to go to the gym, trying to change their appearance, trying to appear more sexy to other people. Buying, and that goes into buying new underwear, any type of clothing that is out of the norm that they would normally buy. So those are just some signs that you want to check and see if your spouse is exhibiting.
What about things like, I hear stories about social media or finding hidden emails, under different accounts. Do you come into things like that in investigations?
Yeah, some people they do target that social media aspect to use it as a cheating ground. It's very simple. You can go online and cheat with another person, and then delete your messages, etc. There's ways to find out if somebody's cheating for that as well.
Okay, we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Who is the cheater usually cheating with, though? Is it usually somebody at work? Is it someone that your spouse knows, or do you think that a lot of times, it depends upon the person and it could be anybody?
Yeah, a majority of the cheating is going to be done with somebody that they know, specifically somebody they work with. You got to remember, when you're working, you spend more of your time at work than you do actually at home. So there are some relationships that get built while you're at work. So we've seen that, in our experience, that a majority of them are going to be people that you're working with. And if not, they're usually somebody that you know.
All right. Now, how do you guys go about catching a cheater? Let's say I hired you to check on my other half. What do you do? Do you go to their job? How do you get in if they're working all day? Give me kind of a roundabout as far as how that would work.
Yeah, and I think the first part to that, and a lot of people are confused about it, is we like to get a really good background knowledge of exactly why you believe something's happening and formulate a specific plan for that, not just going out and just starting this surveillance, because obviously there's money wrapped up, there's emotion. We don't want to just go out there recklessly and start, ruining anything that we potentially could gather for the client. But in that case, yes, sometimes, we do have to get into jobs. Sometimes we do have to get into gated communities or events, where that person might go. It's very up in the air sometimes where people end up. Sometimes they say they're going to work, and in reality, they're not. So you have to be creative, and that's part of the investigation techniques that we've been trained on and that we've used through our experience. And each investigator uses different techniques and different equipment to get that end result for the client, because ultimately, our clients expect to have photographs or sometimes video. And then some of them just want to be documented, just want to know, hey, this is what's happening, but they don't actually want any video or photographs. So it really just depends on the individual client, what they expect, and kind of, being flexible. I think that's the biggest thing in investigations, is just being flexible, being able to think on your feet, because you really never know what that person's next step is.
It kind of sounds exciting to me in a way. I mean, for you, it's probably bad for the person that hired you, but for you guys, it's got to be a little bit of excitement, I would think, in trying to catch them, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. What can a person do themselves to catch a cheater? And I'll tell you, I ask that because, I've looked online years ago to see, I know there are companies that sell all types of surveillance type things. What can they do?
Yeah, we don't recommend a spouse to actually do their own investigation. If they want to look into the computer, they can do that. However, if you're going to follow somebody, we leave that up to the professionals. So you're not going to go to your doctor and do your own surgery. You're going to have your doctor do it for you. So we recommend getting with professionals to actually conduct the investigation for you and leave it at that.
Okay. Some of the things that I had looked up online, you can check the internet history. There are keylogger programs that record all the keystrokes, correct, that they can track it that way. But I see these companies online that sell things like phone GPS programs. Do they have receipts, maybe stuff that they find in the car, hidden cameras? Talk to me a little bit about the surveillance part on that.
Yeah, the hidden cameras, that's something that changes, I think, every other day.
Okay.
Because there's new technology, there's different ways to get it. And most of the cameras, at least in investigations, are all proprietary stuff that we build, that the investigators are comfortable working with, that they've had experience with and figured out this is the best method to use to get the evidence that I need. When people do it themselves, a lot of times they're going to go out and, get the teddy bear camera or the alarm clock or something that they might find in a spy shop. A lot of that stuff, it can cause issues because they might not deploy it in the right methods, or, if they do get caught, with, I know in my case, I would be like, why is this, teddy bear camera in my room, and a lot of people,
right.
That might cause more issues than it really was meant to do in the first place, in my opinion. And it could also be very dangerous depending on if somebody is deploying their own surveillance techniques. You never really know who that person's cheating on with. And a lot of times, at least in our experience, we're prior law enforcement, we do have that tactical background to be able to know situations, if they're dangerous, how to overcome them or how to react. But if a lay person doesn't know that, it could be very dangerous for them and potentially put their life, in a bad place.
So basically, don't do it yourself.
Yeah. Like Al said, I would consult with professionals and at least get their opinion. And like I said, we really take it that step further to understand why people believe what they do, and really talk them through it. Sometimes it might just be a jealousy issue or something really might not be happening, and that's where we really take it the step further and really want to get to know our clients and know why they feel that things are happening. So
Okay, so if a husband decides or thinks that maybe his wife is cheating and has the opportunity, because a lot of people do that, look at their cell phone, they might be checking for texts and emails. Is that what starts a lot of somebody hiring a private investigation firm to look into it?
Yeah, it mostly starts from suspicion. So if somebody's always texting on their phone, and when you come by, they put the phone down, it's going to lead you to that want to be able to pick that phone up and say, well, who are they talking to that I can't see? So yeah, if that individual does see text or any type of translations between two individuals, and that could potentially help us also when we're conducting our investigations. So, but we don't recommend that to do that on a daily basis. Like I said, you want to consult with a professional and have the professional lead you through the process of investigation.
Yeah, and Al brings up a good point there is it just changes in daily habits. So for instance, if your spouse has their phone all the time laying on the counter where it's accessible to anybody, and then all of a sudden there's a life change and now they won't let that phone out of their pocket, or they keep it hidden at all times, that's a red flag, which we would consider something that would be very suspicious, that then I can understand why you would formulate those thoughts.
All right, give me maybe one or two examples of real-life stories. Again, no names, but just give me an example of how maybe you caught a cheater.
Yeah, and I'll tell you about one situation that we find that was actually quite interesting and good that we had the resources. But we have an all-terrain and marine unit specifically with our company, so we're able to deploy out on the water or an off-road situation. In this case particular, the spouse was going out on a watercraft, so he was obviously probably thought he was a little bit smarter than any investigators that could probably follow him off of the beaten path or off of the road like most companies would. Well, we had our investigator deploy a watercraft and followed him out to an island where we were able to get some really good quality photographs and video of him with this other lady. And during that time, then they finished the day, continued their cruise on their boat, and we were able to gather all that information. So with that, we were thinking outside of the box and had those methods in place to where we could go off of the road or off of the beaten path. The same as, a lot of people think about private investigators just sitting in a car with a cigar and a big camera. And
Well, that's what we see on TV.
Yeah, exactly. And thinking outside of the box is, like I mentioned before, is something that we do, and we expect all of our investigators to do it. And that's something that keeps you progressive in the field and also helps you to be able to adapt to whatever situations you're confronted with. Somebody gets out of their car and walks into a mall, you have to be ready to adapt to that and be able to go inside and still get your evidence, so your video or your photographs, on the fly.
Okay, I'm going to throw a bizarre one at you. Let's say I thought my husband was cheating on me, and maybe he was going on a regular basis out to clubs or bars. Would you have a woman private investigator go in and see if he would hit on her? Is that something that investigators do, or is that considered entrapment?
Yeah, we don't recommend doing that if you are a private investigator.
Okay.
We're not in the business of entrapping people, making something that it really isn't. We're just documenting the facts of what we see, and then we're providing that to the client. Now, you bring up a good point. There are actually some investigators that do that type of stuff. So it just comes in with who we are. We're ethically based. We don't do that outside the norms of our investigation. That's not something that we want to do and use as a representation of our company.
All right. Now, how do you use the information once you have it? Is it used just for them personally? Do you find that they use the information that you've gathered in divorce court?
Yeah. Florida is a no-fault divorce state. With that being said, your case can still help you. If you have somebody that's cheating on you, it can help you with maybe divvying up the assets. It can help you with maybe child custody. But like some other states, it's not a defining action that says, hey, your spouse was cheating on you, you're going to get awarded all the assets, or you're going to be granted custody of your child. That's not what Florida is, but like I said, it can assist you in your case.
All right. Now, I would think the toughest part of your jobs is actually telling somebody that their other half is cheating on them. How difficult is it in, dealing with the emotional aspect of that?
Yeah, and I think that comes back to our law enforcement background. And, unfortunately, on several cases, we had to go and give people some pretty unfortunate news. And I think that comes back to just being a person and being able to sit down with somebody and be with them during that rough time, and be able to talk them through it and tell them, hey, this is maybe what we found, and help them with that emotional side so that they feel like somebody's there to comfort them. And that's where we really take it a step further, is just being people, being able to sit down with our client, talk them through the situation, not just like a lot of times we'll see just companies passing reports off to people and no explanation. I think that would be something that would be really hard to receive just in an email with no explanation, or not, have anybody to talk to about it, especially if you were in that situation.
They're gonna go home to that spouse, and now it's almost like they have to be prepared, because they may or may not say anything, but it's got to be eating them up inside. So at least you're giving some support to them, which I think is great. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about business fraud.
Do you suffer from back, neck, or body pain? Do you suffer from migraines or have jaw or face pain? Has conventional medicine failed you? Were you injured or in an accident? Call chiropractic physician Dr. Dan Maddock at 813-935-1664. Dr. Dan has helped thousands of patients gain relief for more than 30 years. Dr. Dan is caring, gentle, and takes his time with each patient. He's also a past president of the International Craniopathic Society, a special certification of only 300 chiropractors worldwide. Dr. Dan helps patients from the neck up and the neck down. Dr. Dan accepts most insurance plans. Don't continue to live in pain. Call 813-935-1664 today. That's 813-935-1664, and get on track to better health.
Our highly competitive and hectic world is fraught with dishonesty and challenges. Critical decisions must be made on a daily basis with accuracy when substantial assets are at risk. When you are confronted with a decision point involving opportunity and risk, consult with Sharpline Investigations, statewide experts in due diligence, investigations, and litigation support. Sharpline's professionals work with clients to conduct interviews, deep background investigations, and develop facts and intelligence related to litigation. When circumstances require confidential and expert fact-finding, turn to Sharpline Investigations, the statewide leaders in investigations and risk mitigation. Visit sharplineinvestigations.com or call 855-394-0042.
Welcome back to the Half Empty, Half Full Consumer Advocacy Talk Radio Show. I am here with Alan Kirby from Sharpline Investigations, and in this segment, I want to talk a little bit about how you can prevent, detect, and deter fraud within your business or organization. And I know people that have been defrauded in business, have been embezzled by their employees, which is frightening. Al, you're a certified fraud examiner. Let's start with that. What does that mean?
That's correct. A certified fraud examiner, also known as a CFE, is a credential awarded by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. Basically, there's a 4-part test that we have to complete, be knowledgeable on, and we're considered experts in. And I'll give you the 4 parts. They're going to be fraud, financial transactions, fraud prevention detection, legal elements of fraud, and fraud investigations.
All right. Well, tell me, how much does fraud cost consumers each year? Because I'm sure it's a staggering amount, correct?
Yeah, Lori, fraud's a billion-dollar industry. It actually costs businesses 5% of their revenues. That's according to the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. So to put that into some perspective, if you have $100,000 revenue, 5% of that's going to fraud, and that would be $5,000.
Okay. I know people have been defrauded where the company is brought down to the ground. Sometimes they have to close out, or they have to try and pull it together because they're still liable for their debts, even though the employee took the money and ran. So
yes, absolutely.
All right. Now, talk a little bit more about the types of common fraud within the organization.
Yeah, there's many frauds within organizations, but one particularly is going to be occupational fraud. And to define that for you, it's basically someone in your organization that's stealing your assets from your business.
All right. Talk a little bit about the 3 forms of the occupational fraud.
Yeah, with occupational fraud, there's going to be 3 forms. There's going to be one is asset misappropriation. The second one's going to be corruption. And the third one is going to be financial statement fraud.
Okay, now, define for me what is asset misappropriation, because a lot of people won't understand that term.
Yeah, it sounds quite technical, but simply put, it's basically when an employee steals or misuses any type of organization's assets.
Okay, how do they do that?
There's different ways. One of the ways is skimming. And basically, skimming is just somebody, an employee rather, stealing cash that hasn't been recorded on the books yet. And there's other examples such as theft of company cash, theft of inventory, and even payroll theft. There's a scheme where you create a fake employee, so to speak, and that employee works a 40-hour work week or whatever hour work week they work, and then that perpetrator is going to be cashing that check for that fake employee.
Now, does that happen more with larger companies where maybe it's harder to track, or does it happen equally as much, do you think, with smaller companies where maybe an owner is maybe hands-off or not really paying attention because they trust their employees?
Yeah, it can happen basically in any organization that doesn't have good internal controls set in place.
Now, is it a good idea to have background checks done on employees, or maybe in particular types of jobs?
Yeah. Background checks, you'd be surprised how many employers don't require background checks, or they feel they don't need them. I was talking to a lady who mentioned how she had been in business for 20 years and didn't do any kind of background checks. So I guess you can say she's fortunate. Nobody knows yet if there's actually fraud going on within her business, but according to her, she hasn't needed those for 20 years.
Wow. Okay. Now, we're talking about asset misappropriation. What about things like giving family and friends unauthorized discounts on company merchandise? You hear that all the time. Is that something that happens frequently?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say happens frequently, but it's very easily done. Somebody comes in to, say, for example, a restaurant, and there's discounts for the employees. That employee can give that family member or friend who's not supposed to be getting those discounts the discount for that food or beverage or whatever they're consuming there.
All right, so how can the owner of a company maybe monitor this so that it doesn't happen?
Yeah, you're going to want to have internal control set in place. And basically, we'll go into further detail as far as fraud prevention, different methods you can use within your business to combat fraud issues. Okay.
Now, talk to me a little bit about what types of corruption are there within companies?
There's going to be different types, but the two that come to my mind, one is going to be kickbacks, and the second one will be complimentary bidding. Kickbacks equate it basically to your doctor. You visit your doctor, the doctor's going to prescribe you a specific drug, and that pharmaceutical company is going to be providing that doctor with a quote-unquote kickback as far as a vacation or any type of gift that they would provide to them for pushing their type of drug.
Okay. Now, I've heard, though, that that's common, right? I mean, as far as the drugs, you hear that if the doctor saves the insurance company money, they do give them something.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And you were going to talk maybe a little bit about complimentary bidding.
Yeah, complimentary bidding, basically you have 4 contractors, for an example. 3 of those contractors are going to bid extremely high on a job. The 4th one is going to bid just slightly lower. However, he's still going to be higher than what it should cost the job. When the bid comes and they select the lowest bidder, they're going to select obviously that lowest bidder, who would be that 4th bidder who bid just slightly lower. And now that's going to be a cycle, and it's going to happen that time. And then the next time they're going to switch roles, and somebody else out of those 4 contractors is going to be the quote-unquote lowest bidder.
Okay, I don't like hearing any of that, actually, but I'm sure it's common, right?
Yeah, that's very common.
Oh, my gosh. Well, financial statement fraud is the intentional misreporting of financial information with the intent to mislead others. So give me your statement on that.
Yeah, well, Lori, one of the reasons why companies commit financial statement fraud is going to be where they can portray their failing company, so to speak, as a more stable, financially stable, or more reputable to maybe investors, or to obtain some lines of credit.
So how can a company show that they have X amount of revenue when really maybe they have very little revenue? They do fraud on the books. In other words, they rewrite everything. They have 2 sets of documents or 2 sets of books, so to speak.
Yeah, well, basically they would create fictitious revenues, and basically that's false income coming in, as far as saying, hey, I did X amount of work and I received this much money in doing that work. That's a false revenue. So basically, going to create those and say, hey, I'm more stable because my job is my business is bringing in more money than really in reality they're losing money.
I gotcha. Okay. Now, who within a company, what type of person is most likely to be the top offender for occupational fraud?
Yeah, there's going to be it could be anybody in your organization, but specifically speaking, they're going to be your lower level employees, and right behind them you're going to have management, and then lastly you'll have owners or executives. But the most prolific offenders would be your lower level employees.
Okay. What are some of the ways that fraud can affect an organization?
Yeah, there are many ways. I'm just going to name a few of them. With fraud comes, fewer pay increases. There's going to be increased layoffs. If you don't have the revenue to pay your employees, you're not going to be able to retain them on your books. It's going to create a decrease in employee benefits, and then most significantly, it's going to create a negative impact on the business because it's going to create publicity, and that's the last thing a business wants. Because let's face it, nobody wants to do business with with another organization who's pretty much tainted by fraud.
Right, and you hear that all the time with companies that it affects the stock market if they're public, correct? And then it can drop the stock down. Now, why does fraud occur? Because I always try to think on do the right thing, but you have people psychologically that don't, and they're on the other side of the boat. So why do you think fraud occurs?
Yeah, and through our certification, we learn pretty much why it occurs, and they relate it to a fraud triangle. And it comes from Donald Cressy, who's a criminologist. And simply put, the fraud triangle has 3 points. It's gonna require all three for a fraud to occur. And the first one's going to be financial pressures. There needs to be some kind of financial pressure, some motivating factor of why that individual is going to commit the fraud. The second one's going to be opportunity. There needs to be some ability for that person to commit the fraud. So an example would be a lack of internal controls. You're going to have maybe extreme trust in one single person. You're not going to segregate duties within your organization. And lastly, it's going to be rationalization. There needs to be some rationalization as far as why that person committed the fraud. They're going to rationalize it in their behavior or in their explanation of why they committed it. So an example of that would be, maybe I was just borrowing the money. I was going to give it back. Or my boss does it. Why can't I do it?
Wow, that's sad and it's illegal. What are some of the red flags of fraud?
Yeah, there's going to be, and before I mention these, I just want to make it clear that not one specific red flag is going to indicate that an actual person in your organization is committing fraud. However, you got to take it as a whole and look at them from outside the box. So basically, living beyond someone's means. So if you're working a job and you're on a $30,000 salary and you're driving a $80,000 car, that's a pretty good sign that the money came from somewhere else. And like I said earlier, it doesn't necessarily mean that fraud's occurring, because they could have a relative who bought it for them, or maybe their spouse has a higher paying job. But that is one of the red flags. Financial difficulties. If you got somebody that's having difficulties with their finances, right there, that's your pressure. So that's a good indicator that, hey, let's keep an eye on that individual. Maybe there's an unwillingness to share duties. There's people that don't want to take vacations, or like I said, share the duties. So with that, if somebody's not wanting to share or take a vacation, there's a reason why. With frauds, you have to continuously man them, and if you're gone for a week or a couple of days, or you switch positions, now somebody else is in your spot, and that fraud could potentially come to the surface.
Right.
So that's And it even comes down to excessive pressures within your organization. If you have these stringent requirements on your employees to meet specific financial goals, that can create that pressure. Hey, I have to make these goals. If I can't make them legitimately, maybe I'll commit some fraud, and I'll be able to be awarded for meeting those goals.
Wow, some scary thoughts. Well, we're gonna take a quick break, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Why can't you see what you're doing to me? When you Don't believe a word I say. We can't go on together with suspicious minds.
Are your credit reports a mess? Are debt collectors hounding you? Maybe you're in foreclosure or headed towards foreclosure and don't know where to turn. It's time to stop panicking. Take back control of your life. Make the first step by calling Credit Education Consultants today at 813-500-6064. That's 813-500-6064. Mention the word radio for a free 15-minute consultation. Don't delay. Call today.
Our highly competitive and hectic world is fraught with dishonesty and challenges. Critical decisions must be made on a daily basis with accuracy when substantial assets are at risk. When you are confronted with a decision point involving opportunity and risk, consult with Sharpline Investigations, statewide experts in due diligence, investigations, and litigation support. Sharpline's professionals work with clients to conduct interviews, deep background investigations, and develop facts and intelligence related to litigation. When circumstances require confidential and expert fact-finding, turn to Sharpline Investigations, the statewide leaders in investigations and risk mitigation. Visit sharplineinvestigations.com or call 855-394-0042.
Do you suffer from back, neck, or body pain? Do you suffer from migraines or have jaw or face pain? Has conventional medicine failed you? Were you injured or in an accident? Call chiropractic physician Dr. Dan Maddock at 813-935-1664. Dr. Dan has helped thousands of patients gain relief for more than 30 years. Dr. Dan is caring, gentle, and takes his time with each patient. He's also a past president of the International Craniopathic Society, a special certification of only 300 chiropractors worldwide. Dr. Dan helps patients from the neck up and the neck down. Dr. Dan accepts most insurance plans. Don't continue to live in pain. Call 813-935-1664 today. That's 813-935-1664 and get on track to better health.
Welcome back to the Half Empty, Half Full Consumer Advocacy Radio Show. My guests today are Alan Kirby from Sharpline Investigations, and we're talking about fraud. And I want to continue on a bit here. You know, how can someone detect fraud within their company? Do they ever have signs, or is it a total blindside?
Yeah, sometimes there are signs. They're going to be those red flags that we discussed earlier. You know, if you do discover some red flags, we always recommend consulting with a certified fraud examiner, somebody who's trained within fraud, to conduct an investigation in relation to it. But some ways you can detect them, everybody knows about internal or external audits, reconciling accounts, or even conducting, document examinations. But the most important way to detect a fraud is actually through tips. Studies show that tips are going to be the best way to detect fraud.
Now, does that refer to whistleblowers when you hear about whistleblowers that are turning over, information on a company? Yes,
pretty much. And there's different ways to make your employees feel safe, and some companies have fraud hotlines, the ethics hotlines, where you can call in as an employee and say there's some unethical issues within my company, and then you're anonymous. There's not going to be any recourse for bringing that to the.
The company isn't going to know. They're just going to know it was an employee.
Correct.
All right. How can fraud be prevented? Let's go over some of those things again.
Yeah. Well, it all comes down to the tone at the top. Your employees are going to look at what the top of the organization is doing. If you're acting unethically, it's going to trickle down, and the rest of the organization is going to become very unethical. Segregation of duties. Don't have your accountant, doing your payroll, and maybe even signing your checks or cashing them. Segregate all your duties. The more responsibilities you give to one person, especially in your financial department, the more ability fraud is going to have to be committed there.
Now, I want to mention something on that. Years ago, I knew somebody that worked for a nonprofit, and they only had one person, which was the treasurer, on the account. There was no other party on that account, and what that treasurer did was utilize all of that money fraudulently, and then years later came forward and actually admitted, believe it or not, and was able to make restitution and not end up in prison. But that's something that frightens me. That's a nonprofit, but if you should have 2 people minimum, correct, on a bank account, I would think within a company, so that you know what's going on, or at least within a nonprofit.
Yeah, and it goes back to just segregating those duties. You don't ever want to have, like you said, one person in control of all of that. It's very easy to commit fraud in that aspect and also cover it up because you're the one that's dealing with it.
All right, let's talk a little bit about how attorneys can effectively utilize private investigators within their existing practice. And we have 10 ways. So let's go over the first way: case review and case reinvestigation.
Yeah, with that, Lori, comes when an attorney intakes a case, a lot of times they're reading over the reports that were done by the police. And they do have a lot of unanswered questions during that initial review. So what a private investigator and us specifically could do for them, being prior law enforcement officers, we know how to examine and read these reports. And we know how the investigations were conducted. So with that, we have that inside knowledge to be able to pinpoint any loopholes that they might have within the case, and go back out there to know if all the pertinent information was actually documented truthfully and correctly.
Okay. What about witness identification?
And with that comes a lot of times these investigators that are on the case, especially working night shifts, are your rookie guys. They don't have that experience, and they're overworked, to be quite frank with you. And they don't have time to locate sometimes and interview all the witnesses that might have information about these individual cases. So with that saying is that, investigators are going to have, obviously, the client's best interest in mind. To go back out there to locate those witnesses, to really kind of dive into the case and get all the facts out there in the open.
All right. What about conducting background checks?
Yeah, and with that, the background checks is also something that's very useful because as a private investigation agency, if you're eligible, you have access to the state and national databases, which are the same that law enforcement has access to. And us, in particular, we are prior law enforcement, so we were eligible for those background check softwares. And with that, a lot of companies advertise they can do the background checks, but they don't have the proper licensing or credentials to get the full access. And with that process comes actually some of these guys that work out of their house. They're not eligible to get the full program because they don't have the security measures in place. So that would be something that we would definitely recommend is verify, do these people have commercial locations, and which level are they able to get this information?
Okay, so some people may only get limited information, whereas other people might be able to get more information.
Exactly.
Is what you're saying. Talk about litigation support.
And this can be done on either side. Sometimes the insurance companies will hire us for litigation to support their claim. And the same on the defense side to support that something did or did not occur. So with this, we can help to paint a clear picture of what actually occurred during that incident. And it can, support a positive outcome depending on what information is brought forward during that time.
All right. How do you develop a forecast for your opponent's next move?
Yeah, and with that, a lot of times the attorneys want to know, well, what does the other side have on us, or vice versa. So with hiring a professional investigator, you can get those key details, and that could either be through fact-finding, through evidence gathering, or maybe surveillance on the opposite side to know exactly kind of where they're coming from and what tools they have in their toolbox.
All right. How do you guys help them prepare for cross-examination and trial? And maybe give an example of that as well.
Yeah, and with that is going out and re-interviewing people, and that gets down to that case review and re-investigation. When you go out and you identify these key players that might have some information, you conduct a thorough interview with them. You know exactly what they're going to say. So the attorneys in this case would know already prior to a deposition or to a trial of what that witness is going to say and how they're going to answer specific questions.
So it helps them prepare because you already kind of know the answer.
Yeah, and a lot of times
point.
The attorneys might not even know how somebody's going to answer something or where they're going to go with it. So by having that professional investigator go out there and talk to the person, they already have all the information they need to properly prepare on their end. Okay.
What about collecting and reviewing evidence?
And that's good as well because sometimes things are overlooked. And it goes back to before saying the fact of just that law enforcement is overworked. They have calls holding So they don't have time to really kind of take everything that they need at the time of the actual incident. So things could be overlooked, and it's good to be able to go back out there and gather those so that they're able to be presented in court.
All right, now, can you guys testify as expert witnesses in court?
Yes, and I actually have. I'm a drug recognition expert, and I've been certified in Hillsborough County as an expert witness. And with that, all of Sharpline Investigations' team is made up of knowledgeable, trained, and experienced guys. Al, as he mentioned before, is a certified fraud examiner, so he's able to be called on as an expert to testify in fraud matters. We also have different guys on our team as far as oral intercepts, wiretap experts that have experience dealing with drug cases, search and seizure, and we also have a certified fire and arson investigator on our team.
All right, now, how do you identify if and when a subject received medical treatment?
And that's something that we do. Our investigators that do this are trained particularly to look at an area surrounding either a residence or a workplace, to go out to the closest 15 facilities is the package that we've created within that 70-mile radius from whatever address somebody chose. And what they'll be able to do is document if anybody received treatment, where they received it, and it really kind of is specific towards what that client would want. So if they want us to check gyms or, hospitals or doctor's offices.
Gotcha. How do you conduct physical surveillance? I know you talked. You can do marine work. You can go out on a boat.
Yeah, we can conduct surveillance pretty much in any kind of atmosphere. We can do it from vehicles. We can do it stationary on foot. Marine unit, like I said before. We've even been called upon to take aerial photographs from planes before. So it really kind of depends. It goes like we said earlier. It's just being able to adapt constantly to different methods and the newest techniques and equipment that's available on the market to be able to cater, uniquely to each situation that we're asked to do.
Very good. I want to thank both of you very much for joining me today. Would you give out your contact information in the event that a listener would like to contact you?
Yeah, we could be reached by phone at 855-394-0042. Or we can be reached online at sharplineinvestigations.com. And we even have a Facebook. That's facebook.com/sharplineinvestigations.
Great. Thank you very much. I think you gave out a lot of great information for our listeners. Join us every week for a new half-empty, half-full consumer advocacy radio show. Learn something new every week and get smarter faster. Be safe.
Here we go again, asking where I've been. You can't see the tears are real, I'm crying.
Our highly competitive and hectic world is fraught with dishonesty and challenges. Critical decisions must be made on a daily basis with accuracy when substantial assets are at risk. When you are confronted with a decision point involving opportunity and risk, consult with Sharpline Investigations, statewide experts in due diligence, investigations, and litigation support. Sharpline's professionals work with clients to conduct interviews, deep background investigations, and develop facts and intelligence related to litigation. When circumstances require confidential and expert fact-finding, turn to Sharpline Investigations, the statewide leaders in investigations and risk mitigation. Visit sharplineinvestigations.com or call 855-394-0042.